A debt now released.
France, 1918.
Isabel Hartley had been staring at the night sky, lost in thought, when she noticed something strange. The stars above the battlefield had shifted, forming letters. Samuel Hayes. But when she blinked, they scattered, vanishing as if they had never been there. Chapter 1. A whisper across the trenches. The air hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blend of damp earth, cordite, and the ever-present, cloying sweetness of decay. Isabel Hartley, her nurse's uniform stained more with mud than blood tonight, tilted her head back, seeking a sliver of solace in the inky expanse above. The stars, usually a comforting constant, seemed distant, cold witnesses to the madness unfolding below. It was late March, 1918, and the relentless churn of the Western Front had ground on for years, a monstrous, insatiable beast devouring men and hope in equal measure. Isabel traced the familiar constellations, seeking Orion, the hunter, a futile attempt to ground herself in something beyond the immediate horror. She'd been stationed at this field hospital near Amiens for almost 2 years, her initial naive idealism long since replaced by a weary, bone-deep exhaustion. She'd seen too much, felt too much, lost too much. Her brother, Thomas, had fallen at the Somme, his body never recovered, leaving a gaping hole in her heart and a hollow ache in her soul. Tonight, however, something was different. The usual cacophony of war, the distant rumble of artillery, the sporadic crackle of gunfire, the moans of the wounded seemed to fade into a muted hum. As she gazed upwards, a peculiar shimmer caught her eye. The stars, or perhaps it was a trick of the light, a figment of her sleep-deprived mind, seemed to shift, to rearrange themselves. For a fleeting, heart-stopping moment, they formed letters, clear as day against the velvet backdrop of the night. Samuel Hayes. Isabel blinked once, twice. The stars scattered, returning to their fixed positions, the name dissolving like smoke in the wind. She shook her head, a shiver tracing its way down her spine. It was the exhaustion, she told herself, the relentless pressure, the grief that never truly left. She was seeing things, conjuring phantoms in the sky. Yet, the name lingered, a whisper in the silence of her mind. Samuel Hayes. She didn't recognize it, had never heard it before. It wasn't a name from her past, not a friend, not a relative. It was nothing, and yet it felt significant. A sudden burst of activity near the main tent jolted her back to reality. A fresh wave of wounded was arriving, stretcher-bearers staggering under the weight of broken bodies. Isabel pushed the strange vision, the whispered name, to the back of her mind. There was no room for fanciful imaginings here, no space for anything but the immediate, brutal demands of survival. Dr. Dubois, his face etched with fatigue and grim determination, barked orders, his voice hoarse from shouting over the din. Isabel hurried to his side, her hands already reaching for bandages, antiseptic, anything to stem the tide of blood and pain. Another push near the anchor. Mademoiselle Hartley, Dubois said, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. The Germans are relentless. We're losing ground, losing men, losing everything. Isabel nodded, her gaze meeting his for a brief, shared moment of despair. They both knew the truth. This war, this endless, senseless slaughter, was breaking them all. Hours blurred into a nightmarish tapestry of screams, blood, and the metallic tang of fear. Isabel moved mechanically, her training taking over, her mind numb to the horrors unfolding around her. She cleaned wounds, stitched flesh, held the hands of dying men, offering what little comfort she could in this godforsaken place. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky with streaks of pale gray and bruised purple, the flow of wounded finally began to subside. Isabel, her body aching, her spirit depleted, stumbled outside for a breath of fresh air. The air was still heavy, but the first rays of sunlight offered a fragile promise of warmth. She looked up at the fading stars, remembering the vision, the name. Samuel Hayes. It was absurd, she knew, to give it any credence. And yet a scrap of paper, caught on a nearby bush, fluttered in the breeze. Isabel, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity, reached for it. It was a torn piece of a letter, the ink smudged and faded, but still legible. "I hope this letter finds you well, though I doubt anything is well in this hellhole. I saw something strange last night, something I can't explain. I swear, the stars they formed your name, the rest of the letter was missing, torn away." Isabel stared at the fragment, her heart pounding against her ribs. It couldn't be. It was impossible. And yet, the words mirrored her own experience, her own impossible vision. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the script masculine and hurried. A cold dread, mixed with a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope, perhaps, or maybe just morbid curiosity, settled in her stomach. Who was the soldier? Who had written this letter? And who was the you it referred to? The you whose name appeared in the stars. Was it her? Was she somehow connected to this mysterious Samuel Hayes? The name felt less like a phantom now, and more like a thread, a fragile, silken thread pulling her towards an unknown, potentially dangerous destiny. She carefully folded the scrap of paper and tucked into her pocket close to her heart as the morning sun finally broke and bathed the trenches and the hospital in its golden light. She needed to find the other part, to find out who sent it and understand what it meant. It was foolish, reckless even, but at least it was something. It was a spark of hope, the size of a star. Chapter 2. The Ghost of Amiens. The days that followed were a blur of relentless work and quiet, unsettling questions. Isabel found herself constantly glancing at the sky, searching for any sign, any repeat of the celestial message. The stars, however, remained stubbornly indifferent, offering no further clues. The scrap of letter, tucked safely in the pocket of her uniform, became a tangible link to the mystery, a constant reminder of the impossible names she'd seen. She tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it as a product of stress and exhaustion. But the words on the torn paper, the echoing of her own experience, wouldn't let her. It felt like a message, a desperate plea across the chasm of war, and she felt compelled to understand it. During a rare lull in the influx of wounded, Isabel found herself wandering through the relatively undamaged parts of Amiens. The city, once a vibrant hub of commerce and culture, now bore the scars of war. Buildings were pockmarked with bullet holes, windows shattered, and streets littered with debris. Yet, amidst the destruction, life stubbornly persisted. Shopkeepers, their faces etched with worry, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, selling what little they had. Children, their eyes wide with a premature understanding of the world's cruelty, played amongst the ruins. Isabel found herself drawn to the Amiens Cathedral, its magnificent Gothic spires still reaching towards the heavens, a testament to faith and resilience in the face of destruction. The cathedral had suffered some damage, but it remained largely intact, a sanctuary of peace amidst the surrounding chaos. Inside, the air was cool and still, scented with incense and the faint aroma of old stone. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the floor. Isabel sat in one of the pews, her gaze fixed on the intricate details of the rose window, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the monochrome world outside. She closed her eyes, seeking a moment of respite, a brief escape from the relentless pressure of the hospital. The image of the stars, forming the name Samuel Hayes, flashed in her mind. It was so vivid, so real, even now. "Lost in thought, mademoiselle?" The voice, deep and resonant, startled her. Isabel opened her eyes and turned to see an elderly priest standing beside her, his face lined with wisdom and a quiet sadness. He wore the traditional black cassock, a silver crucifix glinting at his chest. "Father Moreau," Isabel said, recognizing him as one of the cathedral's clergy. She'd seen him occasionally, tending to the spiritual needs of the wounded and the dying. "Forgive me, Father," she replied. "I was just troubled." He finished gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "These are troubling times, my child. The weight of the world rests heavily on all our shoulders." Isabel hesitated, then, almost without thinking, She pulled out the scrap of letter from her pocket. "Father, I found this near the hospital. It speaks of something strange, something I saw myself." Father Moreau took the fragment, his brow furrowing as he read the faded words. He looked up at Isabel, his gaze searching. "The stars?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You saw a name in the stars?" Isabel nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief at sharing her secret, her burden. "Samuel Hayes," she said, the name sounding almost sacred in the hushed stillness of the cathedral. Father Moreau's eyes widened slightly. He closed his eyes for a moment, his lips moving in silent prayer. Then he opened them, a flicker of something akin to recognition in their depths. "Samuel Hayes," he repeated, the name now carrying a weight of significance. "There are stories, old legends about the stars carrying messages, whispers from the beyond. Some say that in times of great turmoil, the heavens reveal secrets, guide lost souls." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the high, vaulted ceiling. "There was a soldier, years ago, before the war, a young man named Samuel Hayes. He was a scholar, a poet, fascinated by the stars. He believed they held the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe, of life and death." Isabel listened, captivated. The priest's words resonated with a strange, almost mystical quality. "He disappeared," Father Moreau continued, his voice tinged with sadness. "Vanished without a trace. Some say he went mad, driven to the brink by his obsession. Others say he ascended, became one with the stars he loved so much." He looked back at Isabel, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and wonder. "It is said that his spirit still wanders, a ghost of Amiens, seeking something. Or perhaps someone." A shiver ran down Isabel's spine. The priest's story, however fantastical, seemed to offer a bizarre, almost unbelievable explanation for what she'd seen. Was it possible? Could she be connected to this long-lost soldier, this ghost of Amiens? She was not a believer, but she was a believer in the mysteries of the universe, and she had seen it after all. I don't know what to believe," Isabel confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "Believe in what your heart tells you, my child," Father Moreau said gently. "The stars may speak to us in mysterious ways, but their message is always meant to guide us, to lead us towards the truth." He handed the scrap of letter back to her. "Keep this close. It may be more important than you realize. And pray, Mademoiselle Hartley. Pray for guidance, pray for strength, and pray for the soul of Samuel Hayes." Isabel took the letter, her fingers tracing the faded ink. The mystery had deepened, the whispers across the trenches now intertwined with the legends of a lost soul. She left the cathedral, the image of the stars, the name, and the priest's words echoing in her mind. The world felt different now, charged with a strange, almost palpable energy. She was no longer just a nurse, tending to the wounds of war. She was a seeker, drawn into a mystery that spanned both the earthly and the celestial realms. And somewhere out there, a man, or maybe a spirit, with the name formed in the stars was waiting to be found. The weight of it felt heavy, but the quest had just begun. Chapter 3. Scars beneath the uniform. The following days brought a relentless barrage of casualties, pushing Isabel and the other medical staff to their breaking points. The spring offensive was in full swing, and the Germans were pressing hard, their artillery shells raining down on the Allied lines with terrifying ferocity. The field hospital was overflowing, the air thick with the stench of blood, antiseptic, and unwashed bodies. Sleep became a luxury, a fleeting escape from the grim reality of the war. Yet, amidst the chaos and the carnage, Isabel couldn't shake the image of the stars, the name Samuel Hayes, and the priest's cryptic words. The mystery had become a lifeline, a distraction from the overwhelming despair that threatened to engulf her. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Isabel found herself sitting outside the hospital tent, sharing a meager ration of bread and cheese with a young soldier named Private Thomas Baker. He was a fresh-faced recruit, barely out of his teens, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and forced bravado. He'd been wounded in the leg, a relatively minor injury compared to the horrific wounds she'd seen, but enough to send him back from the front lines. "You've seen a lot, haven't you, nurse?" Baker asked, his voice hesitant. Isabel nodded, offering him a weary smile. "More than I ever wanted to," she admitted. I don't know how you do it," he said, shaking his head. "Facing all that death and pain every day." Isabel shrugged. "You just do," she said. "You have to. There's no other choice." They fell silent for a moment, the only sound the distant rumble of artillery. Then, Baker spoke again, his voice lower, almost conspiratorial. "I heard stories from the older blokes about this place, about Amiens," he said. "They say it's haunted by the ghost of a soldier." Isabel's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Baker, her eyes narrowed. "A ghost?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Yeah," Baker replied, his eyes darting nervously around. "They say he was a scholar, a poet obsessed with the stars. He disappeared before the war, vanished without a trace." Isabel felt a chill run down her spine. This was the second time she'd heard the story, the same details, the same unsettling sense of mystery. "What was his name?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Hayes," Baker replied. "Samuel Hayes. They say he still wanders the city, looking for something. Or someone." Isabel closed her eyes, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The letter, the stars, the priest, the soldier's story, it all pointed to the same conclusion. She was connected to this ghost, this Samuel Hayes, in some way she couldn't yet understand. Have you ever seen him?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Baker shook his head. "No, but I've felt him. Sometimes, at night when the guns are quiet, you can feel a presence, a coldness, like someone's watching you." He shuddered. "They say he's looking for his lost love, a woman he left behind." Isabel's breath caught in her throat. A lost love? Was that the connection? Was she somehow the reincarnation, the echo, of this woman Samuel Hayes had loved? It was a preposterous idea, and yet a sudden commotion near the entrance of the hospital interrupted their conversation. A new group of wounded was arriving, their cries of pain piercing the night. Isabel stood up, her mind racing. She needed to find out more, to uncover the truth about Samuel Hayes and his connection to her. As she hurried towards the tent, she noticed a figure standing in the shadows, watching her. He was tall and thin, his features obscured by the darkness, but she could sense his gaze, intense and unwavering. He wore the uniform of a British officer, but there was something different about him. He seemed to shimmer, to fade in and out of focus, like a mirage. Isabel stopped, her heart pounding. She stared at the figure, her breath caught in her throat. He raised his hand, slowly, as if in greeting, or perhaps warning. Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, he vanished, melting back into the shadows. Isabel stood there for a moment, stunned, her mind struggling to process what she'd just seen. Was it him? Was it Samuel Hayes? Or was it just another figment of her imagination, another phantom of the war? The only thing that told her it wasn't her imagination was the reaction from Baker, who was staring at the same spot, pale and unable to speak. She didn't know, but she was determined to find out. The mystery had deepened, the stakes had risen, and the line between reality and illusion had blurred. She was caught in a web of secrets, of whispers from the past, and she knew that she couldn't rest until she'd untangled the truth, no matter how dangerous or unsettling it might be. The scars of war were not just physical. They went much, much deeper. Chapter 4. Letters from a Stranger. The apparition, or whatever it was, left Isabel shaken but resolute. She needed answers, and she knew that the fragmented letter was her only tangible clue. She decided to visit the military post office in Amiens, hoping to find some information about the sender, or perhaps even the recipient, of the torn message. The post office was a chaotic scene, a hive of activity filled with soldiers sending and receiving letters, parcels, and telegrams. The air was thick with the smell of paper, ink, and the faint, lingering scent of hope and fear. Isabel approached one of the clerks, a middle-aged woman with a weary face and ink-stained fingers. "Excuse me," Isabel said. "I'm trying to find some information about a letter, or rather, a part of a letter." The clerk looked at her skeptically. We handle hundreds of letters every day, mademoiselle. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. Isabel pulled out the fragment, carefully unfolding it.
This is all I have, she said.
It's important. The clerk took the scrap, her eyes scanning the faded words. She frowned. This is unusual, she said. The handwriting, it's not typical of a soldier's letter. It's more refined, educated. She examined the paper more closely. And the paper, it's high quality, not the standard issue military stationery. Isabel's heart quickened. This confirmed Father Moreau's description of Samuel Hayes as a scholar, a poet. Is there any way to trace it? Isabel asked, her voice filled with hope. To find out who sent it, or who it was addressed to. The clerk hesitated. It's difficult, she said. We don't keep records of every letter that passes through here. But there might be a way. She explained that all outgoing mail from soldiers was censored, checked for sensitive information that could be useful to the enemy. The censors often kept notes, sometimes even copies, of letters that raised concerns. It's a long shot, the clerk warned. But if this letter was deemed unusual, there might be a record of it in the censors' files. She directed Isabel to another building, a drab, gray structure that housed the military censor's office. Isabel thanked her and hurried across the street, her mind buzzing with anticipation. The censor's office was a stark contrast to the bustling post office. It was quiet, almost eerily so, the air heavy with the weight of secrets and unspoken words. Isabel approached a stern-looking officer, a major with a neatly trimmed mustache and cold, appraising eyes. She explained her request, showing him the fragment of the letter. The major listened impassively, his expression unchanging. This is highly irregular, mademoiselle, he said, his voice clipped and formal. Censors' records are confidential, for security reasons. Isabel pleaded with him, explaining that the letter might be connected to a missing soldier, a man who had disappeared before the war. She mentioned the name Samuel Hayes, hoping for a reaction. The major's eyes flickered for a moment, a subtle shift in his expression. He seemed to recognize the name, but he quickly masked his reaction. I'll see what I can do, he said, his voice noncommittal. But I make no promises. He took the fragment and disappeared into a back room, leaving Isabel to wait in a sterile, silent office. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock amplifying her anxiety. Finally, the major returned, his expression still unreadable. He held a file in his hand, a thin folder tied with string. We have a record of a letter matching that description, he said. Sent approximately 3 weeks ago from a Lieutenant Alistair Fairbanks, stationed near the anchor. Isabel's heart leaped. A name, a rank, a location. She was finally getting closer. Can I see the letter? She asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. The major hesitated. The contents are sensitive, he said. But given the circumstances, I can show you a portion of it. He opened the file and extracted a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the original letter, the handwriting identical to the fragment she possessed. Isabel scanned the text, her eyes widening in disbelief. Did I know it sounds mad, but I swear I saw it. The stars, they formed a name, Samuel Hayes. It was like a vision, a message from beyond. I don't know what it means, but I feel connected to it, to him. I know you think I'm losing my mind, dearest Isabel, but I had to tell someone. Isabel gasped. The letter was addressed to her. Or, at least, to someone with her name. It was written by a Lieutenant Fairbanks, a man she'd never met, yet he claimed to have seen the same impossible vision, the same name in the stars. And he believed he was connected to Samuel Hayes, just as she did. This is incredible, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The major nodded, his expression softening slightly. It seems you are not alone in your experience, mademoiselle, he said. He closed the file. I cannot allow you to take this, he said. But I can give you Lieutenant Fairbanks' current location. He's been transferred to a field hospital near Ypres. He was wounded. Isabel's heart sank. Wounded. The word carried a weight of dread, a reminder of the ever-present danger of the war. But she was determined to find him, to speak to him, to understand the connection they shared. Thank you, Major, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. You have no idea how much this means to me. She left the censor's office. The image of the letter, the name Isabel, and the lieutenant's location burned into her memory. She had a new destination, a new lead, and a renewed sense of purpose. The mystery was unfolding, revealing its secrets one layer at a time, and she was determined to follow it to its conclusion, no matter where it might lead. The journey, she instinctively knew, would take her closer to the heart of the war, and perhaps closer to the truth about the name written across the stars. Chapter 5. The Rendezvous at Dusk. The journey to Ypres was fraught with difficulty. The roads were congested with military traffic, convoys of trucks and ambulances carrying troops and supplies to the front lines. The constant threat of shelling and air raids added to the tension, making every mile a precarious undertaking. Isabel managed to secure a ride with a medical convoy, traveling in a cramped, uncomfortable ambulance, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant and fear. The landscape around Ypres was even more devastated than Amiens. The city, once a beautiful medieval town, was now a shattered ruin, its buildings reduced to rubble, its streets choked with debris. The surrounding countryside was a desolate wasteland, a scarred and barren expanse of mud, craters, and shattered trees. The field hospital where Lieutenant Fairbanks was stationed was located in a former monastery, its stone walls pockmarked with bullet holes, its windows shattered. The air was filled with the sounds of suffering, the moans of the wounded, the cries of the dying, and the constant, relentless thunder of artillery fire. Isabel found Fairbanks in a crowded ward, lying on a narrow cot, his face pale and drawn, his left arm heavily bandaged. He was asleep, his breathing shallow and labored. Isabel hesitated, not wanting to disturb him, but she knew she couldn't wait. She needed to talk to him, to understand the connection they shared, the mystery of the stars. She gently touched his uninjured arm, her fingers brushing against his skin. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at her, his gaze unfocused, his mind still clouded by pain and medication. "Isabel?" he whispered, his voice hoarse and weak. Isabel's heart skipped a beat. He recognized her, or, at least, he recognized the name. "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling slightly.
"I'm Isabel Hartley."
I read your letter." Fairbanks' eyes widened, a flicker of recognition, of understanding, crossing his face. He struggled to sit up, his body racked with pain. "You saw it too?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The stars the name?" Isabel nodded.
"Samuel Hayes," she said.
"I saw it too. And I found your letter part of it." She explained how she'd come to find the fragment, how she'd traced it to him, how she'd learned about the legend of the ghost of Amiens. Fairbanks listened intently, his eyes fixed on her face. He seemed to be struggling to process the information, his mind still grappling with the reality of his situation. It's more than just a legend," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I've seen him, Samuel Hayes. He's real." Isabel's breath caught in her throat. This was the confirmation she'd been seeking, the validation of her own experience. "Where?" she asked, her voice urgent.
"When?"
"In the trenches near the anchor," Fairbanks replied. "He appeared to me during a bombardment. He was translucent like a ghost, but I could see his face, his eyes."
"He spoke to me."
Isabel leaned closer, her heart pounding. "What did he say?" Fairbanks hesitated, his gaze shifting away. He said he was waiting for you, for Isabel. He said you were the key."
"The key."
The word resonated with a strange, almost mystical significance. The key to what? To unlocking the mystery of his disappearance? To finding peace for his restless spirit? "I don't understand," Isabel confessed, her voice filled with confusion. "Neither do I," Fairbanks admitted. "But I believe him. I believe he needs your help, our help." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and desperation.
"We need to find him," he said.
"We need to find out what he wants." Isabel nodded, her resolve hardening. She was no longer just a nurse, tending to the wounds of war. She was a participant in a mystery that transcended the boundaries of life and death, a mystery that had brought her together with this wounded lieutenant, a man she'd never met, yet felt inexplicably connected to. "We'll find him," she said, her voice firm. Together. A nurse approached, her expression concerned.
Lieutenant Fairbanks, she said. You need to rest.
You're still weak. Fairbanks nodded, his eyes closing wearily. I'll be fine, he said.
Just give us a moment.
The nurse reluctantly retreated, leaving Isabel and Fairbanks alone. We should meet, he said when she had gone, his voice barely a whisper. When I'm stronger, when I can leave this place. There's a ruined church near the old city walls. Meet me there at dusk. Isabel agreed. A rendezvous, a secret meeting, in the shadows of a war-torn city. It felt dangerous, reckless, and yet inevitable. As she left the hospital, the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows across the devastated landscape, Isabel felt a sense of anticipation, of fear, and of a strange, almost exhilarating sense of purpose. She was stepping into the unknown, venturing into a realm where the lines between reality and illusion blurred, where the whispers of the past mingled with the horrors of the present. And she knew that she was on the verge of uncovering a truth that would change her life forever, at the meeting place between two worlds, and a place where a name was written on the fabric of the universe itself. Chapter 6. Between Duty and Desire. The days leading up to the rendezvous were a torment of anticipation and anxiety for Isabel. Fairbanks' words echoed in her mind, the image of his pale face and haunted eyes a constant reminder of the mystery they were entangled in. She found herself torn between her duty to the wounded, the relentless demands of the hospital, and the compelling urge to uncover the truth about Samuel Hayes. She confided in no one, keeping her secret close, fearing ridicule or, worse, accusations of madness. The war had made everyone pragmatic, skeptical, and the idea of a ghost communicating through the stars seemed utterly preposterous, even to her, at times. Yet, she couldn't deny what she'd seen, what she'd felt, and the undeniable connection she shared with Fairbanks. The ruined church, Fairbanks had said, was near the old city walls of Ypres, a place called St. Michael's, a shell of its former self, its roof gone, its walls crumbling, a testament to the destructive power of war. It was a dangerous place, close to the front lines, vulnerable to shelling and sniper fire. But it was also a secluded place, a place where secrets could be shared, where whispers could be heard. On the appointed evening, Isabel made her excuses, claiming fatigue and a need for fresh air. She slipped away from the hospital unnoticed, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the ravaged landscape, painting the sky with hues of orange, purple, and blood red. She found St. Michael's easily enough, its silhouette stark against the fading light. It was a desolate place, a skeleton of a building, its stained glass windows shattered, its altar desecrated, its pews overturned. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone, dust, and the faint, lingering odor of decay. Fairbanks was already there, waiting for her. He was sitting on a broken piece of masonry, his injured arm in a sling, his face pale but resolute. He looked up as she approached, a faint smile touching his lips. You came, he said, his voice soft. Isabel nodded, her heart calming slightly at the sight of him. I wouldn't miss it, she replied. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the distant rumble of artillery and the mournful cry of a lone bird circling overhead. The atmosphere was charged with unspoken questions, with a sense of shared destiny, of a bond forged in the crucible of war and mystery. I've been thinking, Fairbanks said, breaking the silence, about what Samuel Hayes said about you being the key. Isabel looked at him, her eyes questioning. I think it's connected to your name, he continued. Isabel. It's the same name as his lost love. He explained that he'd done some research, delving into old records and archives, seeking any information about Samuel Hayes and his life before the war. He discovered that Hayes had been engaged to a woman named Isabelle Dubois, a young woman from Amiens, a woman who shared not only Isabel's name, but also a striking resemblance, based on an old, faded photograph he'd found. Isabel was stunned. This was more than just a coincidence, more than just a shared vision. It was a tangible link to the past, a connection that spanned generations, a resonance that defied explanation. "But how is that possible?" she asked, her voice trembling. I'm not her." "I don't know," Fairbanks admitted. "But I believe there's a reason why we both saw his name in the stars. I believe there's a reason why we're drawn to this mystery. I believe we're meant to help him."
A moral del Emeros.
Isabel could not leave her patients. She was a nurse, and she was needed. She couldn't leave the hospital. But her heart was aching. "I can't leave. I have responsibilities," Isabel said, her eyes filling. "I understand," Fairbanks said. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and something else, something deeper, something that sent a shiver down her spine. It was a look of admiration, of respect, and perhaps of love. Isabel felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time. She was drawn to Fairbanks, to his strength, his compassion, his unwavering belief in the impossible. But she also knew that any relationship between them was forbidden, impossible, a dangerous distraction in the midst of war. "We're from different worlds," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're an officer, I'm a nurse. And there's the war." Fairbanks reached out, his uninjured hand gently touching hers. His touch was warm, reassuring, sending a jolt of electricity through her body. "The war doesn't matter," he said, his voice firm. "Not here, not now. What matters is us. What matters is what we feel." He leaned closer, his eyes locking with hers. The air between them crackled with tension, with a desire that had been simmering beneath the surface, unspoken but undeniable. Isabel felt herself drawn to him, her heart pounding, her senses overwhelmed. But then, a sudden noise, a sharp crack, shattered the moment. A sniper's bullet whizzed past, narrowly missing them, embedding itself in the crumbling wall behind them. They sprang apart, their hearts racing, the reality of the war crashing down upon them. They were not safe, they were not immune, they were vulnerable, exposed. "We have to go," Fairbanks said, his voice urgent. "It's not safe here." They fled the ruined church, running hand in hand, seeking shelter in the shadows of the city. The moment of intimacy, of forbidden desire, was shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of their situation. They were caught between duty and desire, between the demands of the war and the pull of their hearts, between the whispers of the past and the uncertainty of the future. And they knew that their journey, their quest, had just become even more dangerous, even more complicated. The world had interrupted. Chapter 7. Echoes of a Lost Love. The near miss with the sniper's bullet served as a stark reminder of the ever-present danger that surrounded them. Isabel and Fairbanks, shaken but unharmed, found refuge in a deserted cellar beneath a bombed-out building. The air was damp and cold, the silence punctuated only by the occasional rumble of distant artillery and the drip, drip, drip of water seeping through cracks in the ceiling. They huddled together, sharing a blanket Fairbanks had managed to scavenge, their bodies close, their breaths mingling in the darkness. The fear, the adrenaline, the near-death experience had heightened their senses, making them acutely aware of each other's presence. "That was close," Fairbanks said, his voice still trembling slightly. Isabel nodded, her heart still pounding. "Too close," she agreed. They fell silent again, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. The war, the mystery, the forbidden attraction, it was all too much, too overwhelming. "I keep thinking about her," Isabel said, breaking the silence. Isabel Du Bois, Samuel Hayes' fiancée. Fairbanks nodded. "I've been trying to find out more about her," he said. "But the records are incomplete. The war has disrupted everything, destroyed so much." He explained that he'd managed to contact a distant relative of the Du Bois family, an elderly woman living in a small village near Amiens. She'd provided him with some details about Isabel Du Bois, about her life, her personality, her relationship with Samuel Hayes. "She was remarkable," Fairbanks said, his voice filled with admiration. "Intelligent, independent, passionate, she was a talented artist. A painter, she loved the stars, just like Samuel." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the darkness. "They were deeply in love," he continued. They were soulmates, destined to be together. But then he disappeared. And she was devastated. Isabel felt a pang of sympathy, of empathy, for this woman she'd never met, yet felt so connected to. She could imagine the pain, the heartbreak, the loss that Isabel Du Bois must have endured. What happened to her? Isabel asked, her voice soft. Fairbanks hesitated. The records are unclear, he said. Some say she died of a broken heart shortly after Samuel's disappearance. Others say she joined a convent, dedicating her life to God. He looked at Isabel, his eyes searching. But the relative I spoke to, she hinted at something else. She said there were rumors that Isabel Du Bois had a secret. A secret that she took to her grave. A secret. The word hung in the air, adding another layer of intrigue to the already complex mystery. What secret could Isabel Du Bois have possessed? And how did it relate to Samuel Hayes' disappearance, to the stars, to the connection she and Fairbanks shared? We need to find out more, Isabel said, her voice firm. We need to uncover the truth about both of them. Fairbanks nodded in agreement. He felt the same, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose, to be in this quest together. I have a plan, he said. When I'm discharged from the hospital, I'll go to the village, where the Du Bois relative lives. I'll try to learn more about Isabel Du Bois, about her life, her secret. He looked at Isabel, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and concern. But it's dangerous, he said. I don't want you to be involved, not anymore. It's too risky. Isabel shook her head, her resolve unwavering. I'm not afraid, she said. I'm in this with you, Alistair. We're in this together. She used his first name for the first time, the sound of it both intimate and unfamiliar. It was a small act of defiance, a subtle acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them, a bond that transcended the constraints of their roles, of the war, of everything. Fairbanks smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his face. Alistair, he repeated, savoring the sound of his name on her lips. I like that. He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. His touch was soft, tender, sending a wave of warmth through her body. Isabel leaned into his touch, her eyes closing, her heart aching with a longing she could no longer deny. The cellar, the darkness, the danger, it all faded away, replaced by the intensity of the moment, the raw, undeniable attraction between them. They were two souls, caught in the maelstrom of war, drawn together by a shared mystery, a shared destiny, and a love that was both forbidden and inevitable. But even as their hearts reached for each other, the echoes of the past, the whispers of a lost love, served as a poignant reminder of the complexities of their situation. They were not alone in this cellar, not alone in this mystery. They were shadowed by the presence of Samuel Hayes and Isabel Du Bois, their intertwined fates woven into the fabric of their own lives. And they knew that until they uncovered the truth about the past, their own future, their own love, would remain uncertain, fragile, hanging precariously in the balance. The secrets of the two Isabels, across time, called to each other. Chapter 8. The Spy Among Us. Fairbanks' discharge from the hospital was delayed due to complications with his wound. An infection had set in, requiring further treatment and rest. Isabel, while relieved that he was recovering, felt a growing frustration at the enforced separation. The mystery of Samuel Hayes and Isabel Du Bois consumed her thoughts, and the inability to pursue it actively was a constant torment. During this time, the field hospital experienced a surge in activity. A new offensive had been launched, and the casualties were pouring in, overwhelming the medical staff. Isabel worked tirelessly, her days and nights blurring into a relentless cycle of blood, pain, and death. Yet, amidst the chaos, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She noticed subtle things, small details that didn't quite add up. A misplaced medical chart, a whispered conversation overheard in the corridor, a soldier with a strangely vacant expression, a nurse who seemed to be asking too many questions. Individually, these incidents were insignificant, easily dismissed. But collectively, they created a sense of unease, a suspicion that something was not right. One evening, while working late in the supply room, Isabel stumbled upon a hidden compartment behind a stack of bandages. Inside, she found a small, leather-bound book. It was a code book used for encrypting and decrypting messages. Isabel's heart pounded. This was not standard-issue medical equipment. This was something used by spies. She carefully examined the book, her mind racing. Who did it belong to? And what messages were being sent or received? The implications were chilling. There was a spy in their midst, someone working for the enemy, someone betraying their trust, someone endangering their lives. Isabel knew she couldn't keep this discovery to herself. But who could she trust? She couldn't go to the authorities, not without proof. The spy could be anyone, even someone in a position of power. She needed to be careful, discreet, to gather more information before exposing the traitor. She decided to confide in Dr. Dubois, the head physician. He was a man of integrity, of unwavering loyalty, and she trusted him implicitly. She showed him the code book, explaining her suspicions. Dubois was shocked, his face paling. He examined the book carefully, his brow furrowing. "This is serious, Mademoiselle Hartley," he said, his voice grave. "Very serious. We must proceed with caution." He agreed that they couldn't go to the authorities without concrete evidence. They needed to identify the spy, to uncover their network, to understand their motives. "We'll work together," Dubois said. "We'll observe, we'll investigate, we'll find the traitor." They began a covert investigation, watching, listening, questioning, piecing together the fragments of information. They focused on the individuals who had aroused Isabel's suspicion, scrutinizing their behavior, their movements, their interactions. The investigation was slow, painstaking, and fraught with danger. They knew that the spy was watching them, too, that one wrong move could expose them, could put their lives at risk. One name kept surfacing in their investigation: Nurse Marie Dubois. She was a young woman, seemingly dedicated and compassionate, but there was something about her that didn't quite ring true. She was too curious, too inquisitive, too eager to please. And she had been seen talking to the soldier with a vacant expression, the one Isabel suspected of being a contact. Isabel and Dr. Dubois decided to set a trap. They planted a false message, a coded message using the code book, indicating a planned troop movement. They left the message where Nurse Marie Dubois would find it, and then they waited. The following day, the soldier with a vacant expression was seen leaving the hospital, heading towards the enemy lines. He was carrying a message that could only have come from one source: Nurse Marie Dubois. The trap had worked. They had their spy. But as they prepared to confront her, a shocking revelation emerged. Nurse Marie Dubois was not who she seemed to be. She was not a French nurse working for the Germans. She was a British intelligence agent, working undercover, gathering information about a German spy ring operating within the hospital. The soldier with a vacant expression was not a contact, but a double agent, feeding false information to the Germans. The code book was not a German code book, but a British one, used to communicate with their agents. Isabel and Dr. Dubois were stunned. They had misjudged Marie Dubois completely, had nearly exposed a valuable asset, had almost jeopardized a crucial intelligence operation. They now had a friend, and not an enemy. The discovery also added a complex level to her quest, and also added more questions. If Marie Dubois was not the real name, and was a British intelligence agent, did she, perhaps, know something about Samuel Hayes? The moral dilemma stung. What was right, and what was wrong? And who was the real enemy? Chapter 9. A stolen moment in Paris. The revelation that Nurse Marie Dubois, whose real name, they learned, was Agent Eleanor Davies, was a British intelligence operative, turned the situation on its head. Isabel and Dr. Dubois, initially shocked and embarrassed by their misjudgment, quickly realized the potential value of Eleanor's expertise and connections. Eleanor, once she understood their genuine intentions and their connection to the mystery of Samuel Hayes, was surprisingly forthcoming. She'd heard whispers of the legend, of the ghost of Amiens, but had dismissed it as wartime folklore. However, Isabel's and Fairbanks' shared experience, coupled with a fragmented letter, piqued her interest. "Intelligence work is all about uncovering secrets," Eleanor said, her eyes sharp and intelligent. And this sounds like a secret worth uncovering. She agreed to help them, using her resources and contacts to investigate Samuel Hayes' disappearance and the mystery surrounding Isabelle Dubois. She warned them, however, that it would be difficult, that the war had obscured many records, that memories were fading, that the truth might be buried forever. Meanwhile, Fairbanks was finally discharged from the hospital, his wound healed, his spirit eager to resume the quest. He contacted Isabelle, arranging a meeting in Paris, a brief respite from the front lines, a chance to compare notes and plan their next move. Paris, even in wartime, retained a semblance of its former beauty and vibrancy. The streets were bustling with people, soldiers on leave, civilians going about their daily lives, lovers strolling along the Seine. The city offered a stark contrast to the devastation of the front lines, a reminder of what they were fighting for, of the life that existed beyond the trenches and the hospitals. Isabelle and Fairbanks met at a small cafe near the Notre Dame Cathedral, a secluded spot where they could talk freely. They shared their experiences, their findings, their frustrations. Fairbanks had traveled to the village where Isabelle Dubois' relative lived, but had learned little more than he already knew. The relative, an elderly woman named Madame Sophie, was frail and forgetful, her memories fragmented and unreliable. She kept repeating the same things, Fairbanks said, his voice tinged with disappointment. That Isabelle Dubois was beautiful, that she loved Samuel, that she was heartbroken when he disappeared. But she also mentioned a diary. She said Isabelle kept a diary, a secret diary, where she wrote down her thoughts, her feelings, her secrets. A diary. The word resonated with significance. A tangible record of Isabelle Dubois' life, a potential key to unlocking the mystery. Did she say where it was? Isabelle asked, her voice filled with hope. Fairbanks shook his head.
She didn't know, he said.
She said it was hidden somewhere safe. She couldn't remember. The diary became their new focus, their new obsession. They knew that if they could find it, they might finally uncover the truth about Samuel Hayes and Isabelle Dubois, about their connection to the past, about their own intertwined destinies. Eleanor, who had joined them in Paris, offered her assistance. She used her contacts in the French intelligence service to search for any records of Isabelle Dubois, any mention of a diary, any clue that might lead them to its location. The search was slow and frustrating, yielding little result. The war had disrupted everything, destroyed so much, made it difficult to find anything, let alone a hidden diary from years past. But then a breakthrough. Eleanor discovered an old, forgotten file in the archives of the Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library of France. It contained a list of items confiscated from the Dubois family home after Isabelle Dubois' death. And on that list, one item stood out, a small, leather-bound book described as a personal journal. Isabelle and Fairbanks were ecstatic. This was it, they were sure of it. The diary. They rushed to the library, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The librarian, a stern-looking woman with a pince-nez perched on her nose, retrieved the file and the confiscated items, which were stored in a secure vault. She handed them the book, a small, delicate volume bound in faded blue leather. Isabelle took it, her fingers trembling. This was it, the key to the mystery, the voice of the past. They opened the diary, their eyes scanning the faded ink, the elegant handwriting. It was Isabelle Dubois' diary, her personal journal, her secret thoughts, her innermost feelings. And as they began to read, they were transported back in time, drawn into the world of a young woman in love, a woman haunted by a mystery, a woman who held the key to their own intertwined destinies. A secret romance bloomed in wartime Paris, away from judging eyes. The diary was just the first step, but as they read, a sense of guilt crept up. They were intruding into a private life. They were reading the intimate entries of someone who couldn't give them permission to. Chapter 10. The Price of Silence. The diary of Isabelle Dubois was a revelation, a window into a world of love, loss, and secrets. It chronicled her passionate relationship with Samuel Hayes, their shared dreams, their hopes for the future, their unwavering belief in the power of love. It also revealed the depth of her despair after his disappearance, her struggle to cope with the loss, her desperate search for answers. But the diary also contained something else, something unexpected, something that sent a chill down Isabel Hartley's spine. It contained coded messages, hidden within the seemingly innocent entries, encrypted using a complex cipher that only Samuel and Isabel Dubois knew. Isabel and Fairbanks, with Eleanor's help, deciphered the messages. They revealed a shocking truth. Samuel Hayes had not simply disappeared. He had been recruited by British intelligence, sent on a dangerous mission behind enemy lines, a mission to gather information about a new German weapon, a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. Isabel Dubois had been his contact, his lifeline, the one person he could trust. She had used the diary to communicate with him, to send him messages, to receive his reports, to keep him informed. But then, the messages had stopped. Samuel had vanished, his fate unknown. Isabel Dubois had been left alone, desperate, fearing the worst. The last entry in the diary was heartbreaking. "My dear Samuel," she had written, "I have not heard from you in weeks. I fear you are gone. But I will never give up hope. I will keep searching for you, until my last breath. And I will keep your secret, our secret, safe. No matter the price." The price. The words resonated with a chilling significance. What price had Isabel Dubois paid to keep Samuel's secret? What had happened to her? Isabel and Fairbanks knew they had to find out. They had to uncover the truth about Samuel's fate, about Isabel Dubois' sacrifice, about the secret that had cost them both so much. Eleanor used her connections to access classified intelligence files, searching for any mention of Samuel Hayes, of his mission, of his disappearance. The search was difficult, hampered by wartime secrecy, by incomplete records, by the deliberate obfuscation of information. But then, a breakthrough. Eleanor discovered a file, a top-secret file, that contained a report on Samuel Hayes' mission. The report was brief, incomplete, and heavily redacted. But it revealed one crucial detail. Samuel Hayes had been captured by the Germans. He had been interrogated, tortured, but he had refused to betray his country, to reveal his mission, to compromise his contact. He had died a hero, protecting the secret, protecting Isabel Dubois. Isabel felt a wave of grief wash over her, a profound sense of loss for a man she'd never met, yet felt so deeply connected to. She also felt a surge of admiration, of respect, for his courage, his loyalty, his sacrifice. But the report also contained another piece of information, a disturbing revelation. It stated that Isabel Dubois had been arrested by the French authorities, accused of being a German spy. She had been tried, convicted, and executed. Isabel was stunned. This was not the ending she had expected, not the fate she had imagined for the woman who had loved Samuel Hayes so deeply. "It's not true," she said, her voice trembling. "It can't be true."
She was not a spy.
She was protecting him, protecting his secret. Eleanor nodded, her expression grim.
"I know," she said.
"But that's what the records say. That's the official story." They knew that the official story was often a lie, a cover-up, a way to protect the guilty, to conceal the truth. They knew that Isabel Dubois had been framed, that she had been sacrificed to protect someone else, to keep a secret that was even bigger than Samuel Hayes' mission. But who had framed her?
And why?
What was the real secret? And what was the price of silence? The answers, they knew, were buried deep within the web of wartime espionage, of betrayal, of lies. The price, however, they were about to find out was far, far steeper than any of them imagined. It was a dilemma of truth versus peace. Chapter 11. Beneath a Sky of Shells. The revelation that Isabel Dubois had been executed as a German spy, despite being innocent and protecting Samuel, fueled a burning desire for justice within Isabel and Fairbanks. They were determined to clear her name, to uncover the truth behind her framing, and to expose the real traitors. Eleanor, with her intelligence connections, proved invaluable. She delved deeper into the classified files, navigating a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and deliberate misdirection. She discovered that the case against Isabelle Dubois had been built on flimsy evidence, fabricated testimonies, and the influence of a powerful, shadowy figure within the French government. This figure, a high-ranking official named Henri Dubois, a distant relative of Isabelle Dubois, adding another layer of betrayal, had been secretly working for the Germans. He had used his position to manipulate the investigation, to frame Isabelle Dubois, and to cover up his own treasonous activities. The motive, Eleanor discovered, was complex and multifaceted. Henri Dubois was not only motivated by greed, by the money the Germans had paid him, but also by a deep-seated resentment towards Samuel Hayes and Isabelle Dubois. He had been secretly in love with Isabelle, and he had been consumed by jealousy and bitterness when she had chosen Samuel over him. He had seen Samuel's mission as an opportunity to get rid of his rival and to punish Isabelle for rejecting him. He had used his influence to ensure that Samuel was captured and that Isabelle was framed as a spy. Isabelle and Fairbanks were outraged, disgusted by Henri Dubois' treachery and cruelty. They were determined to expose him, to bring him to justice, to clear Isabelle Dubois' name. But it wouldn't be easy. Henri Dubois was a powerful man, with allies in high places. He was protected by a web of secrecy and corruption. He was also aware that they were investigating him, that they were getting close to the truth. He began to take countermeasures, using his influence to discredit them, to obstruct their investigation, to threaten their lives. He planted false evidence, spread rumors, and even attempted to have Fairbanks reassigned to the front lines, where he would be more vulnerable. Isabelle and Fairbanks found themselves in a dangerous game of cat and mouse, pursued by a ruthless enemy who would stop at nothing to protect his secrets. They had to be careful, discreet, to stay one step ahead of him. They decided to return to Amiens, to the place where it all began, to the city where Samuel Hayes and Isabelle Dubois had lived and loved. They hoped to find some clue, some evidence that they could use to expose Henri Dubois. They visited the Dubois family home, now abandoned and dilapidated, a shell of its former self. They searched every room, every corner, hoping to find something, anything, that might help them. And then they found it. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in Isabelle Dubois' former bedroom, they discovered a small, wooden box. Inside, they found a collection of letters, photographs, and documents. The letters were from Samuel Hayes to Isabelle Dubois, love letters, filled with passion, with devotion, with hope. The photographs were of Samuel and Isabelle, together, smiling, happy, in love. And the documents were the proof they needed. They were copies of Henri Dubois' secret communications with the Germans, outlining his treasonous activities, his plans to betray his country, his plot to frame Isabelle Dubois. Isabelle and Fairbanks were elated. They had the evidence, the smoking gun, that would expose Henri Dubois and clear Isabelle Dubois' name. But as they left the house, they were confronted by a group of men, armed men, led by Henri Dubois himself. He had been watching them, waiting for them, anticipating their discovery. "You should have stayed away," Dubois said, his voice cold and menacing. "You should have let the past remain buried." He ordered his men to seize Isabelle and Fairbanks, to take the box, to destroy the evidence. A struggle ensued, a desperate fight for survival. Isabelle and Fairbanks fought bravely, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. Fairbanks was wounded, a bullet grazing his shoulder. Isabelle was captured, the box ripped from her grasp. Dubois stood over her, his face twisted with hatred and triumph. "It's over," he said. "You've lost." But then, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Eleanor, anticipating trouble, had alerted the authorities, the military police. They arrived just in time, surrounding Dubois and his men. Dubois was arrested, his treachery exposed, his reign of terror brought to an end. The evidence was recovered, Isabelle Dubois' name was cleared, and justice, finally, was served. The sky above Amiens, once filled with the smoke of battle and the darkness of deceit, now seemed to clear, the stars shining brightly, as if in celebration, as if in recognition of the courage and the love that had triumphed over evil. But another sky loomed above them. The sounds of war still raged, and all victories felt small. Chapter 12. The Unspoken Vow. With Henri Dubois' arrest and the clearing of Isabelle Dubois' name, a significant chapter in their quest had closed. But the larger mystery, the fate of Samuel Hayes and the lingering questions about his mission, remained. While they knew he had died a hero, the exact circumstances of his death and the details of his final days were still shrouded in secrecy. Fairbanks, recovering from his wound, felt a renewed sense of urgency. He was determined to uncover the full truth, to honor Samuel's memory, and to find some closure for himself and Isabelle. Eleanor, with her intelligence connections, continued to assist them, digging deeper into the archives, searching for any trace of information about Samuel's final mission. She discovered that Samuel had been part of a small, elite unit of spies, tasked with infiltrating a German research facility near the Belgian border. This facility was rumored to be developing a new, devastating weapon, a weapon that could potentially change the course of the war. Samuel's mission had been to gather information about this weapon, to identify its capabilities, and to sabotage its development if possible. He had been successful in infiltrating the facility, posing as a German scientist. He had managed to gather valuable intelligence, sending coded messages to Isabelle Dubois through his diary. But then, something had gone wrong. The Germans had become suspicious, security had been tightened, and Samuel had been exposed. He had been captured, interrogated, and tortured, but he had refused to betray his mission, to reveal his contacts, to compromise his country. He had been executed, his body disposed of, his fate deliberately obscured by the Germans. They had wanted to erase him, to make him disappear, to prevent his story from ever being told. Isabelle and Fairbanks were devastated by the details of Samuel's final days, by the brutality of his death, by the injustice of his fate. But they were also inspired by his courage, his resilience, his unwavering loyalty. They decided to travel to the location of the former German research facility, now abandoned and in ruins, a desolate reminder of the war's destructive power. They wanted to see the place where Samuel had spent his final days, to pay their respects, to honor his memory. The journey was difficult and dangerous, the area still riddled with unexploded ordnance, the landscape scarred and barren. But they persevered, driven by a sense of duty, of obligation, of love. They found the facility, a crumbling complex of concrete buildings, shattered windows, and rusting machinery. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, of dust, of the ghosts of the past. They explored the ruins, searching for some sign, some trace, of Samuel's presence. They found a cell, a small, dark, damp room where he had been imprisoned, tortured, and ultimately executed. Isabelle stood in the cell, her heart aching, her eyes filled with tears. She could imagine Samuel, trapped in this place, facing his death with courage and defiance. She felt his presence, his spirit, his unwavering love. She reached out, her hand touching the cold, stone wall. And then she saw it, scratched into the wall, barely visible, almost erased by time and neglect, were 3 words: Isabelle, je t'aime. Isabelle gasped, her breath catching in her throat. It was Samuel's handwriting, his final message, his last declaration of love. Fairbanks came to her side, his arm around her, offering comfort and support. He saw the words, too, and he understood their significance. He never gave up, Fairbanks said, his voice soft. He never stopped loving her, loving you. Isabelle nodded, tears streaming down her face. She knew that Samuel's love transcended time, transcended death, transcended the boundaries of reality. It was a love that had endured, a love that had inspired, a love that had brought her and Fairbanks together. In that moment, standing in the ruins of a war-torn past, surrounded by the ghosts of lost souls, Isabelle and Fairbanks made an unspoken vow. They vowed to honor Samuel's memory, to keep his story alive, to cherish the love that had brought them together. They knew that their journey was not over, that there were still challenges ahead, that the war still raged. But they also knew that they had found something precious, something enduring, something that would sustain them through the darkness, something that would guide them towards the light. They had found love, a love forged in the crucible of war, a love that would last a lifetime. And a new love was born, in the ashes of an old, deep one. They couldn't put the past away, but they could start building a future. Chapter 13. A Dance with the Enemy. The discovery of Samuel's final message in the abandoned research facility solidified Isabel and Fairbanks' bond, deepening their commitment to each other and to honoring the legacy of Samuel and the first Isabel. They returned to their respective duties, Isabel to the field hospital and Fairbanks to his regiment, but their hearts and minds were intertwined, their thoughts constantly returning to each other and to the unfinished business of the war. The war, however, had other plans. Fairbanks' regiment was ordered to participate in a major offensive, a push to break through the German lines and, hopefully, bring a swift end to the conflict. The fighting was fierce, brutal, and relentless, the casualties staggering. Fairbanks, leading his men with courage and determination, found himself in the thick of the battle, facing death at every turn. Isabel, back at the field hospital, received a constant stream of wounded, the horrors of the war brought directly to her doorstep. She worked tirelessly, her skills and compassion pushed to their limits, her heart heavy with worry for Fairbanks, for his safety, for his life. During a rare lull in the fighting, Fairbanks managed to send Isabel a letter, a brief, hurried note, scribbled on a scrap of paper. "My dearest Isabel," he wrote, "the fighting is intense, the loss is heavy. But I am alive, and I am holding on. I think of you constantly, your face, your smile, your strength. You give me the courage to carry on, the hope to believe in a future beyond this war. I love you, more than words can say." Isabel clutched the letter to her heart, tears streaming down her face. It was a lifeline, a reminder of their love, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But then the news came. Fairbanks' regiment had been ambushed, caught in a devastating crossfire. There were heavy casualties, many dead, many missing, and Fairbanks was among the missing. Isabel was devastated. The world seemed to crumble around her, the light extinguished, the hope shattered. She refused to believe he was dead, clinging to the slim chance that he was still alive, that he had been captured, that he would somehow find his way back to her. She used her connections, her contacts, to search for any information about Fairbanks, any trace of his whereabouts. She contacted Eleanor, who used her intelligence network to scour the battlefields, the prisoner of war camps, the hospitals, searching for any sign of him. The search was fruitless. There was no record of Fairbanks, no trace of his fate. He had vanished, disappeared into the chaos of the war, leaving Isabel with a broken heart and a desperate, unwavering hope. Then a strange twist of fate. During a prisoner exchange, a group of wounded German soldiers was brought to the field hospital. Among them, Isabel noticed a familiar face, a face that sent a jolt of shock and disbelief through her. It was a German officer, a man she had seen before in a photograph in the documents they had found in the Dubois family home. It was a younger version of Henri Dubois, the man who had betrayed Samuel Hayes and framed Isabelle Dubois. This man, Isabel learned, was Carl Schmidt, Henri Dubois' nephew, a high-ranking officer in the German army. He was wounded, but not seriously, his injuries relatively minor. Isabel saw an opportunity, a chance to learn anything about Fairbanks' fate. She knew it was a long shot, a dangerous gamble, but she was desperate. She approached Schmidt, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She pretended to be a sympathetic nurse, offering him comfort, gaining his trust. She asked him about the battle, about the fighting, about the British soldiers they had captured. Schmidt, weakened by his injuries and perhaps swayed by Isabel's kindness, began to talk. He spoke of the ambush, of the fierce resistance of the British soldiers, of the heavy casualties. And then he mentioned a name. A British officer, a lieutenant, who had fought bravely, who had led his men with courage, who had been captured but not killed. Fairbanks, Schmidt said, his voice almost a whisper. Lieutenant Alistair Fairbanks. He is alive. But he is not with us. He was taken elsewhere. Isabel's heart leaped with hope. Fairbanks was alive. He was a prisoner, but he was alive.
But where was he?
Where had they taken him?
And why?
She decided she would find out and dance with the enemy, once again, if she had to. Chapter 14. The Heart's Betrayal. The revelation that Fairbanks was alive, but held captive in an unknown location, ignited a new fire in Isabel. The flicker of hope, however faint, fueled her determination to find him, to rescue him, to bring him home. She knew that Carl Schmidt, Henri Dubois' nephew, held the key to Fairbanks' whereabouts. He was her only lead, her only connection to the truth. But extracting information from him would be a delicate and dangerous game. Isabel continued to play the role of the compassionate nurse, tending to Schmidt's wounds, offering him comfort, and subtly probing him for information. She learned that Schmidt, unlike his uncle, was not a fanatical Nazi. He was a career soldier, a professional, who followed orders but harbored secret doubts about the war and its purpose. He was also, Isabel discovered, deeply disillusioned with his uncle, Henri Dubois. He knew about his uncle's treachery, his betrayal of Samuel Hayes and Isabel Dubois, and he was ashamed of his family's connection to such a man. This disillusionment, Isabel realized, was her leverage. She could use it to appeal to Schmidt's sense of honor, his sense of decency, to persuade him to help her. She began to speak to him about Samuel Hayes and Isabel Dubois, about their love, their sacrifice, their tragic fate. She told him about her own connection to the mystery, about her relationship with Fairbanks, about her desperate search for him. Schmidt listened, his expression shifting from guarded suspicion to a mixture of sympathy and regret. He saw in Isabel a reflection of the first Isabel, a woman of courage, of loyalty, of unwavering love. I don't know where they took him, Schmidt confessed, his voice low and hesitant. But I know who might. He explained that Fairbanks had been captured by a special unit of the German intelligence service, the Abwehr, a unit known for its ruthlessness and its secrecy. This unit was led by a man named Colonel Klaus Richter, a close associate of Henri Dubois, a man who shared his uncle's cruelty and his hatred of the British. Richter is a dangerous man, Schmidt warned. He will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. He is obsessed with breaking British officers, with extracting information, with crushing their spirits. Isabel felt a chill run down her spine. Fairbanks was in the hands of a monster, a man who would torture him, who would try to break him, who might even kill him. I need to find him, Isabel said, her voice trembling. I need to know where he is. Schmidt hesitated, torn between his duty to his country and his growing sense of compassion for Isabel and Fairbanks. He knew that helping her would be a betrayal, a treasonous act, punishable by death. But he also knew that it was the right thing to do, the only way to atone for his family's sins, the only way to honor the memory of Samuel Hayes and Isabel Dubois. He made a decision that would change his life forever, a decision that would put him in mortal danger. I will help you, he said, his voice firm. I will find out where they took Fairbanks. But you must be careful. Richter is not to be underestimated. He gave Isabel a name, a contact, a German officer stationed in Paris who was secretly opposed to the Nazi regime and who had access to information about the Abwehr's activities. This officer, Schmidt said, might be able to help her locate Fairbanks. Isabel thanked him, her heart filled with gratitude and a renewed sense of hope. She knew that she was walking a dangerous path, that she was risking her life, but she was prepared to do whatever it took to save Fairbanks, to reunite with the man she loved. As she left Schmidt's room, she felt a sense of foreboding, a premonition of the challenges ahead. She was entering a world of shadows, of secrets, of betrayal, a world where the lines between friend and foe were blurred, where the price of love could be death. The path ahead was unknown, but so was the heart. Chapter 15. Whispers in the Ruins. Armed with the name of the contact provided by Carl Schmidt, Isabel embarked on a perilous journey to Paris. The city, though seemingly distant from the front lines, was a hotbed of espionage, intrigue, and hidden dangers. Every shadow concealed a potential threat, every stranger a possible enemy. Isabel, posing as a relief worker aiding displaced civilians, navigated the city's labyrinthine streets, her senses on high alert. She contacted Eleanor, who, despite being officially removed from the case due to its sensitive nature, offered her clandestine support, providing Isabel with a safe house and a network of trusted contacts. The contact, a German officer named Captain Wilhelm Brandt, was a man shrouded in secrecy. He was known to operate within the fringes of the German military establishment, his true loyalties ambiguous, his motives unclear. Meeting him was a risk, but Isabel had no other choice. Eleanor arranged the rendezvous, a clandestine meeting in the ruins of an old church on the outskirts of Paris, a place scarred by both time and war. The setting was symbolic, a reflection of the broken world they inhabited, a world where faith and hope were tested to their limits. Isabel arrived at the church at dusk, the fading light casting long, eerie shadows across the crumbling walls. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone, dust, and the faint, lingering odor of incense, a ghostly reminder of the building's former sanctity. Captain Brandt was already there, waiting for her. He was a tall, imposing figure, his uniform impeccably pressed, his face stern and unreadable. He observed Isabel with a calculating gaze, his eyes betraying a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Mademoiselle Hartley," Brandt said, his voice deep and resonant, his accent distinctly German. "You seek information about a British officer. Lieutenant Alistair Fairbanks." Isabel nodded, her heart pounding. "He is a prisoner of the Abwehr," she said. "I need to know where he is." Brandt remained silent for a moment, his gaze unwavering. He was assessing her, weighing her motives, deciding whether to trust her. "The Abwehr is a dangerous organization, mademoiselle," he said finally. "They do not take kindly to inquiries about their prisoners. You're playing a dangerous game." Isabel met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "I am prepared to take the risk," she said. "Fairbanks is important to me." Brandt studied her for a moment longer. Then, a flicker of something akin to respect crossed his face. He seemed to appreciate her courage, her resolve. "I have heard whispers," he said, his voice lowering. "Whispers of a secret facility, a place where the Abwehr takes its most valuable prisoners. A place called Adlerhorst." Adlerhorst. The Eagle's Nest. The name sent a shiver down Isabel's spine. It sounded ominous, forbidding, a place of darkness and despair. "Where is it?" Isabel asked, her voice urgent. Brandt hesitated. "It is hidden deep in the Ardennes forest," he said. "Near the Belgian border. It is heavily guarded, impenetrable. No one has ever escaped from Adlerhorst." Isabel felt a surge of fear, but also a renewed determination. She would not be deterred. She would find Fairbanks, no matter the cost. "I need to know more," she said. "I need to know how to get there, how to get inside." Brandt shook his head. "It is impossible, mademoiselle," he said. "You would be risking your life. Adlerhorst is a death trap." "I am not afraid," Isabel insisted. "I will do whatever it takes." Brandt looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and pity. He knew that she was walking into a lion's den, that her chances of success were slim, that she was likely sacrificing herself for a lost cause. But he also saw in her a spark of hope, a flicker of defiance, a refusal to surrender. And he, a man weary of war, of secrets, of betrayal, felt a flicker of hope himself. He could not give too much, but he gave something. He gave her a map. A crudely drawn map, with vague directions. But a map all the same. "This is all I can give you," Brandt said, his voice barely a whisper. "It may lead you to Adlerhorst, or it may lead you to your death. The choice is yours." Isabel took the map, her fingers trembling. It was a fragile thread of hope, a dangerous path to follow, but it was all she had. She knew then that there was no going back. She had to go to the Eagle's Nest. Chapter 16. The Reckoning of War. The journey to Adlerhorst was a harrowing ordeal. Isabel, guided by the rudimentary map and aided by a network of resistance fighters organized by Eleanor, traversed treacherous terrain, evaded German patrols, and endured constant fear and uncertainty. The Ardennes forest, a dense and forbidding wilderness, seemed to mirror the darkness and danger that lay ahead. As she drew closer to her destination, the sense of foreboding intensified. The air grew heavy, the silence oppressive, the very trees seemed to whisper warnings. Adlerhorst, a fortress carved into the side of a mountain, loomed before her, a monstrous edifice of stone and steel, a symbol of Nazi power and cruelty. Isabel knew that infiltrating the facility would be nearly impossible. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by minefields and barbed wire, its defenses seemingly impenetrable. But she had come too far to turn back. She had to find Fairbanks, to rescue him, or die trying. With the help of the resistance fighters, Isabel devised a plan, a daring and desperate gamble. They would create a diversion, a staged attack on a nearby supply depot, to draw the guards away from Adlerhorst. During the ensuing chaos, Isabel would attempt to sneak into the facility, using a hidden tunnel that the resistance fighters had discovered, a tunnel that led to an abandoned section of the fortress. The plan was fraught with risk, the chances of success slim. But it was their only hope. The diversion worked, at least initially. The attack on the supply depot created a flurry of activity, drawing the guards away from their posts, creating an opening for Isabel. She slipped into the tunnel, her heart pounding, her senses on high alert. The tunnel was dark, damp, and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of earth and decay. Isabel crawled through the narrow passage, her body aching, her mind racing. She could hear the sounds of gunfire and explosions above her, a constant reminder of the danger she faced. After what seemed like an eternity, she emerged into an abandoned section of Adlerhorst, a labyrinth of corridors, empty cells, and rusting machinery. The air was heavy with the ghosts of past prisoners, with the echoes of suffering and despair. Isabel moved cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She searched for Fairbanks, calling his name softly, desperately hoping for a response. And then she heard it, a faint whisper, a muffled cry, coming from one of the cells. "Isabel?" It was Fairbanks' voice, weak but recognizable. Isabel rushed to the cell, her heart leaping with hope. She found him, chained to the wall, his body bruised and battered, his spirit broken but not extinguished. "Alistair," she cried, her voice choked with emotion. She fumbled with the lock, her hands trembling. She had managed to procure a set of lockpicks from Eleanor, but her skills were rudimentary, her attempts clumsy. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the lock clicked open. Isabel rushed into the cell, embracing Fairbanks, holding him tight, tears streaming down her face. "I found you," she whispered. "I found you." But their reunion was short-lived. The sounds of approaching footsteps echoed in the corridor. The guards had discovered their escape. They were coming for them. Isabel and Fairbanks knew they had to get out, to escape before it was too late. But Fairbanks was weak, injured, unable to move quickly. They were trapped. And then, a figure appeared in the doorway, a figure shrouded in shadows. It was Colonel Klaus Richter, the commandant of Adlerhorst, the man who had tortured Fairbanks, the man who represented everything they hated about the war. "So," Richter said, his voice cold and menacing, "the little nurse has come to rescue her lover. How touching." He raised his pistol, aiming it at Fairbanks. "It's over," he said. "You've lost." But then, another figure emerged from the shadows, a figure that Isabel recognized, a figure that filled her with a mixture of shock and relief. It was Carl Schmidt, Henri Dubois' nephew, the German officer who had helped her. He had followed her, tracked her, risking his own life to save them. He was carrying a machine gun, a weapon he must have obtained at the depot. Schmidt raised the weapon, aiming it at Richter. "Let them go," he said, his voice firm, "or I will kill you." A standoff ensued, a tense moment of silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of the three figures in the cell. Richter hesitated, his eyes flickering between Schmidt and Isabel, calculating his options. And then he made a mistake. He underestimated Schmidt's resolve, his willingness to betray his own country, to sacrifice himself for the sake of justice and love. Schmidt fired, the bullets ripping through Richter's body, ending his reign of terror, silencing his cruel voice forever. The reckoning of war had come. The fight between good and evil had a new soldier. But what next? The answer was nowhere. Chapter 17. A Promise Etched in Stars. The death of Colonel Richter marked a turning point, a moment of both triumph and profound loss. While they had escaped the immediate danger of Adlerhorst, the war still raged, and their future remained uncertain. Karl Schmidt, now a fugitive from his own army, had thrown his lot in with Isabel and Fairbanks, his act of defiance sealing his fate. They managed to escape Adlerhorst, navigating the treacherous terrain and evading German patrols with the help of the resistance fighters. Fairbanks, though weak and injured, was alive, his spirit buoyed by Isabel's unwavering love and Schmidt's unexpected heroism. They found refuge in a hidden cabin deep within the Ardennes forest, a sanctuary provided by the resistance. There, they tended to Fairbanks' wounds, shared meager rations, and planned their next move. The cabin was small, rustic, but it represented a haven, a temporary respite from the horrors of the war. As Fairbanks slowly regained his strength, Isabel and he found solace in each other's arms, their love a beacon of hope amidst the surrounding darkness. They spoke of the future, of a life beyond the war, of a world where they could be together, free from fear and danger. But the war was not yet over, and their escape from Adlerhorst had not gone unnoticed. The Germans were searching for them, determined to recapture Fairbanks and punish Schmidt for his betrayal. They were hunted, their lives constantly at risk. One evening, as they sat by the fire, gazing up at the starry sky, Isabel remembered the vision that had started it all, the name Samuel Hayes formed by the stars. She felt a profound sense of connection to the past, to Samuel and the first Isabel, to their love and their sacrifice. "Do you think they're watching us?" she asked Fairbanks, her voice soft. "Do you think they know what we've been through?" Fairbanks looked at her, his eyes filled with love and understanding. "I believe they are," he said. "I believe their love transcends time, transcends death. And I believe they're guiding us, protecting us." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "We've honored their memory," he said. "We've uncovered their secrets. We've fought for justice. And we've found our own love, a love that's been tested by fire, a love that will endure." Isabel leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. She felt a sense of peace, of contentment, despite the dangers that still surrounded them. She knew that they had a long road ahead, that the war was far from over, but she also knew that they would face it together, their love a source of strength and resilience. Schmidt, who had been sitting silently by the fire, spoke up. "I never believed in such things," he said, his voice hesitant. "Love, destiny, fate, but seeing you two, seeing what you've been through, I think I understand now." He had been a soldier, a follower of orders, a man who had believed in duty and obedience. But he had also witnessed the cruelty of war, the betrayal of his own uncle, the courage of Isabel and Fairbanks. He had seen the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, the possibility of redemption. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I followed the wrong path. But I hope it's not too late to change. I hope I can make amends for the sins of my family, for the sins of my country." Isabel and Fairbanks looked at him, their hearts filled with compassion. They knew that Schmidt was a good man, a man who had been caught up in the madness of war, a man who was now seeking redemption. "It's never too late," Isabel said, her voice gentle. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do now, how we choose to live our lives." They made a pact, a promise etched in the stars, a vow to fight for a better future, a world free from hatred, from violence, from war. They would honor the memory of Samuel Hayes and Isabel Dubois. They would cherish their own love, and they would strive to create a world where such tragedies would never happen again. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with danger. But they were not alone. They had each other, they had Schmidt, and they had the guiding light of the stars, a reminder of the love that had brought them together, a love that would endure, a love that would conquer all. They had a choice, to live in fear or to live in hope. Chapter 18. Beyond the Barricades. The escape from Adlerhorst and the sanctuary of the hidden cabin provided a brief respite, but the reality of their situation soon pressed upon them. They were fugitives, hunted by the Germans, their lives constantly in danger. They needed to find a way to reach Allied lines, to escape the clutches of the enemy and return to safety. Eleanor, working tirelessly from her clandestine base in Paris, had been coordinating their movements, providing them with intelligence and support. She had established contact with a network of smugglers who specialized in transporting people across the border into Allied-controlled territory. It was a risky operation, fraught with peril, but it was their only viable option. The plan was to travel under the cover of darkness, avoiding major roads and German patrols, and rendezvous with the smugglers at a designated location near the French-Belgian border. The journey would be arduous, requiring them to navigate treacherous terrain, endure hardship, and rely on their wits and courage. Isabel, Fairbanks, and Schmidt set out on their perilous journey, their hearts filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. They traveled mostly at night, guided by the stars and the occasional whispered instructions from resistance fighters who appeared and disappeared like shadows in the forest. They faced numerous challenges along the way. They encountered German patrols, narrowly avoiding capture on several occasions. They endured hunger, exhaustion, and the constant fear of discovery. They relied on each other, their bond strengthened by the shared adversity, their love a source of unwavering support. Schmidt, once their enemy, had become their trusted ally, his knowledge of the German military and the local terrain proving invaluable. He had shed his former identity, embracing his new role as a protector, a guide, a friend. He was a changed man, his heart transformed by the courage and compassion he had witnessed in Isabel and Fairbanks. As they neared the border, the tension increased. The German presence was heavier, the patrols more frequent, the danger more palpable. They knew that the final leg of their journey would be the most perilous, the most likely to end in capture or death. They reached the rendezvous point, a deserted farmhouse near a heavily guarded section of the border. The smugglers, a group of hardened men and women with weathered faces and wary eyes, were waiting for them. They were experienced, resourceful, and utterly ruthless, their methods often brutal but effective. The smugglers outlined the plan. They would create a diversion, a series of explosions and fires, to draw the German guards away from their posts. During the ensuing chaos, Isabel, Fairbanks, and Schmidt would attempt to cross the border, slipping through a gap in the fence that the smugglers had identified. It was a suicide mission, a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. The diversion began, the night sky erupting in a cacophony of explosions and gunfire. The German guards, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, their attention diverted from the border. Isabel, Fairbanks, and Schmidt made their move, running towards the fence, their hearts pounding, their breaths ragged. They reached the gap, slipping through the barbed wire, their clothes tearing, their skin scraped and bleeding. They were across the border, in Allied territory, but they were not yet safe. The German guards, realizing they had been tricked, opened fire, bullets whizzing past them, kicking up dirt and debris. They ran, dodging and weaving, seeking cover in the darkness. Schmidt, shielding Isabel and Fairbanks with his body, was hit, a bullet striking him in the leg. He stumbled, falling to the ground, his face contorted in pain. Isabel and Fairbanks rushed to his side, their hearts filled with concern. They helped him up, supporting his weight, urging him to keep moving. They reached the safety of a nearby forest, collapsing behind a thicket of trees, their bodies exhausted, their spirits drained. They had made it. They had crossed the border. They were free, but Schmidt was badly wounded, his leg bleeding profusely. Isabel, using her medical skills, tended to his injury, doing her best to stop the bleeding and ease his pain. They were safe for the moment, but they were not out of danger. They were still in enemy territory, miles from Allied lines, with a wounded companion and the German army on their trail. The line between war and peace had been crossed. But the journey wasn't over. Chapter 19. The Long Road Home. The escape across the border marked a significant milestone, but the journey to safety was far from over. They were stranded in a war-torn landscape, miles from Allied lines, with a wounded Schmidt and the ever-present threat of German patrols. Their survival depended on their resilience, their resourcefulness, and the unwavering support of the resistance network. Isabel, using her medical expertise, managed to stabilize Schmidt's condition, but he needed proper medical attention, a hospital, a surgeon. They couldn't stay in the forest, exposed to the elements and vulnerable to discovery. They needed to find shelter, to contact the Allied forces, to arrange for Schmidt's evacuation. Fairbanks, drawing on his military training, took the lead, scouting the surrounding area, searching for a safe route, a way to reach friendly lines. He relied on his instincts, his knowledge of the terrain, and the whispered guidance of local villagers who, despite the risks, offered them assistance and information. They found temporary refuge in a deserted barn, a dilapidated structure that offered minimal protection but provided a brief respite from the harsh conditions. They shared their meager rations, huddled together for warmth, and tended to Schmidt's wound, their spirits buoyed by the shared hope of reaching safety. Eleanor, through her network of contacts, had been tracking their progress, desperately trying to coordinate their rescue. She managed to establish contact with a British intelligence unit operating behind enemy lines, a group of highly trained soldiers tasked with gathering information and assisting Allied personnel. She relayed Isabel, Fairbanks, and Schmidt's location to the unit, urging them to mount a rescue operation. The unit, recognizing the importance of their mission and the urgency of Schmidt's condition, agreed to help. The rescue was a daring and complex operation, requiring precise coordination, impeccable timing, and a significant element of risk. The British soldiers, disguised as local farmers, infiltrated the area, establishing contact with Isabel, Fairbanks, and Schmidt. They devised a plan to transport them to a nearby airfield, a clandestine airstrip used by the resistance for covert operations. From there, they would be flown to safety to a British military hospital where Schmidt could receive the medical attention he desperately needed. The journey to the airfield was fraught with danger, the threat of German patrols ever present. They traveled under the cover of darkness, moving silently through the fields and forests, their hearts pounding, their senses on high alert. They reached the airfield, a small, grassy strip hidden amongst the trees, just as dawn was breaking. A small, unmarked plane was waiting for them, its engine idling, its pilot ready to take off. They boarded the plane, their bodies cramped and exhausted, their spirits filled with a mixture of relief and trepidation. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the air, they looked back at the war-torn landscape below, a landscape that had tested their courage, their resilience, their love. They were leaving behind the battlefields, the trenches, the hospitals, the prisons, the ruins. They were leaving behind the ghosts of Samuel Hayes and Isabel Du Bois, the echoes of a lost love, the secrets of a war that had changed their lives forever. But they were also taking something with them. They were taking their love, their bond, their shared experiences, their unwavering hope for a better future. They were taking the memory of Schmidt's sacrifice, his courage, his redemption. As the plane soared above the clouds, heading towards safety, towards home, Isabel and Fairbanks held each other close, their hearts filled with gratitude, with love, with the promise of a new beginning. The long road home was finally nearing its end, but their journey together was just beginning. The war was ending, but life had just begun. Chapter 20. A Love Forged in Fire. The arrival in England marked the end of their harrowing ordeal, but it also signaled the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with healing, recovery, and the daunting task of rebuilding their lives. Fairbanks, still recovering from his injuries, was admitted to a military hospital, where he received further treatment and began the long process of physical and emotional rehabilitation. Isabel, though exhausted and emotionally drained, remained by his side, her unwavering love and support a constant source of strength. She found temporary accommodation near the hospital, visiting Fairbanks daily, tending to his needs, and sharing stories of their journey, their struggles, their triumphs. Schmidt, after receiving life-saving surgery, was transferred to a secure facility, his status as a defector requiring careful handling by the British authorities. He was interrogated, debriefed, and gradually, his story was verified, his genuine change of heart acknowledged. He was granted asylum, offered a new identity, and given the opportunity to assist the Allied war effort with his knowledge of the German military. As Fairbanks regained his strength, he and Isabel began to plan for their future, a future free from the constraints of war, a future where they could finally be together, openly and without fear. They dreamed of a simple life, a quiet life, a life filled with love, laughter, and the everyday joys that they had been denied for so long. They decided to return to Amiens, to the city where their journey had begun, to the place where the echoes of Samuel Hayes and Isabelle Du Bois still lingered. They wanted to honor their memory, to rebuild the city, to contribute to the healing of a war-torn community. Fairbanks, once fully recovered, was discharged from the military, his service recognized with honors and commendations. He used his skills and experience to secure a position with a reconstruction agency, working to rebuild the infrastructure of Amiens, to restore its former beauty and vitality. Isabel, with her medical expertise, volunteered at a local clinic, providing care to the residents of Amiens, tending to their physical and emotional wounds, offering hope and healing to a community scarred by war. They found a small, modest house near the cathedral, a house that had survived the bombings, a house that they could call their own. They filled it with love, with laughter, with the memories of their journey, with the hope for a brighter future. They visited the graves of Samuel Hayes and Isabelle Du Bois, paying their respects, honoring their sacrifice, acknowledging the profound impact they had had on their lives. They placed flowers on their graves, whispered words of gratitude, and promised to keep their story alive. And they kept their promise. They spoke of Samuel and Isabel to their children, to their grandchildren, telling the story of their love, their courage, their sacrifice. They ensured that their memory would endure, that their legacy would live on. Isabel and Fairbanks lived a long and happy life together, their love forged in the fires of war, tempered by adversity, strengthened by their shared experiences. They witnessed the rebuilding of Amiens, the healing of a nation, the gradual return to peace and prosperity. They never forgot the horrors of the war, the sacrifices that had been made, the lives that had been lost. But they also never forgot the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, the possibility of hope even in the darkest of times. Their love story, a story born amidst the chaos and destruction of war, became a testament to the enduring power of the human heart, a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in a world that had seen too much darkness. The fire that had almost destroyed them had also made them. Epilogue. Years passed, decades even. The scars of war, both physical and emotional, gradually faded, replaced by the gentle patina of time. Isabel and Alistair Fairbanks, their hair now silvered, their bodies bearing the marks of age, remained inseparable, their love a constant, unwavering presence in their lives. They had raised a family, their children and grandchildren a testament to their enduring bond, a living embodiment of the hope they had clung to during the darkest days of the war. They had witnessed the world change, the rise and fall of nations, the advancements of technology, the ever-shifting landscape of human existence. But some things remained constant. The Cathedral of Amiens, its spires still reaching towards the heavens, stood as a silent witness to their love, a reminder of the mystery that had brought them together, a symbol of faith and resilience. The stars, too, remained unchanged, their distant light a timeless reminder of the vision that had ignited their journey, the name Samuel Hayes whispered across the trenches, a message from beyond, a catalyst for a love that had defied the odds. One evening, as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and purple, Isabel, her hand resting gently in Alistair's, spoke softly. "Do you ever think about them?" she asked, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "Samuel, and Isabel, do you think they know how much they changed our lives?" Alistair smiled, his eyes reflecting the wisdom and love of a lifetime. "I believe they do, my love," he said. "I believe their spirits are with us, guiding us, protecting us. Their love, it was a gift, a legacy, a force that brought us together. He looked up at the stars, now beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Their love story, it's a part of our story, he continued. It's woven into the fabric of our lives. And it will continue to inspire us, to guide us, for as long as we live. Isabel nodded, her heart filled with gratitude and a profound sense of peace. She knew that their journey had been extraordinary, a testament to the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring legacy of hope. They had faced death, danger, and despair. They had overcome betrayal, loss, and the horrors of war. They had found love, a love forged in fire, a love that had transcended time, a love that would last in eternity. As the stars shone brightly above them, illuminating the night sky with their timeless beauty, Isabel and Alistair held each other close, their hearts filled with a love that had conquered all, a love that had been written in the stars, a love that would forever be a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The name was still there in the stars. But now, another name had joined it. Two Isabels, connected by time, by love, and a man named Samuel. The names remained, a testament to what was and what would always be.